All right. A lot of interesting things going on in the news. Oscar Pistorius will probably walk after about 2 years in jail. I saw his response to the sentencing by a African woman, South African woman, and he seemed pretty damn happy. I'm reading your letter, your outstanding letter, and I do give you kudos for remembering my birthday. I don't look 24 if I take this hat off. I'd be sadly mistaken. No good excuse. Well, that's all right. Watching football, you got your priorities straight. Drinking Australian beer, frequently urinating. I wanted to ask you about the urinating outside. If the if the neighbors are still peeping out their windows and then complaining at the same time, I find that utterly ridiculous. You go after them for being peeping toms. It's crazy. You don't want to see a male urinate, don't look out a window. But anyway, that's a whole different story. Uh, I'm still hopeful, as Paul Benison is. Paul Benison was rushed to the hospital with a massive lung clots, and the doctor immediately said, "You should be dead." And Paul said this is the fourth time that this has happened to him. So he had a little more faith going on than Joan Rivers, unfortunately, who probably had a few more good years in front of her. Surprised to find it was a doctor error. If all the people in the world, you go to a little clinic instead of the hospital itself. She's dead the second she stops breathing. So, yeah, I'll be injury free, hopefully. I just took a half-mile walk in the cold weather. I'm slowly getting acclimated. That's when I love to walk, as you remember last year's videos when I'd come in absolutely elated after a 2 or 3 mile walk, dressed perfectly with Gore-Tex, with warm Patagonia clothes and etc. A nice pair of boots. So hopefully, yes, it is possible. Trading mountains for beaches, kayaks, sailboats, and paddleboards. Now you've got my interest in feisty Cuban co-eds. I see you in Miami. There's a lot of bad places in Miami. There's a lot of bad places in Cleveland. I never went much past the Euclid Tavern into East Cleveland because you'd be the only white person there and subject to immediate physical danger. And so, yeah, I think Miami is all about navigating the land, dressing the dress, keeping the right attitude, head high but never staring anyone in the eye. So, heck, that's head high but never stare at anyone in the eye. My blog you like? Good. I like doing these blogs as well. 21st Century Catholic Church does not promote jihad. No, I don't think Pope Francis promotes jihad. The guy used to bicycle to work when he was a cardinal. I think Maddie's got to even appreciate that. He addressed the sexual scandal early and forcefully, which Pope Paul was never able really to do. He's done a lot of things. He's opened up the church to gays and says he will not judge. That's not his job. I love the guy. You know, I couldn't have gone into the Catholic Church at a better time. But yeah, they have a horrific history. The Spanish Inquisition, and the Crusades, of course. But everybody's got a horrific. How about the English, who ruled the world by the barrel of a gun, killing 200 million people in the process? That's the context in which we are talking about here, in which these events occur. And that was when life was cheap and kings were kings. So how do you separate the slave trade that killed 200 million people? Those are the most atrocious acts that I can think of in history, and yet, you know, the Catholic Church is not immune. They were a powerful entity. Looking down your letter here. Yeah, these single acts of barbarism occurred in Iraq. I mean, that fucking idiot vice president was waterboarding people and saying it wasn't torture. I never saw Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, or anyone else get waterboarded. If it wasn't truly torture, why wouldn't they simply display that fact? In fact, the Winnebago theory about the Iraqis building a nuclear bomb in a Winnebago that they drove around was from a gentleman who was waterboarded. He said later he simply wanted to save his life. It was all lies. There's no Winnebago out there building nuclear weapons. Hans Blick, no sir, we have no evidence. National Security Council of the United Nations, no sir, we have no evidence. No sir. Meanwhile, Bush is doing the opposite and whipped up the war. To be honest with you, I think the Iraq War is just horrible. One of the greatest evils, because we have a sophisticated country. We don't have to do this. It's not a first resort. And it was a blood game. It was for George Jr.'s father, and George Sr. directed him, thinking that George Jr. would also get a 98% approval rating, like he did during Desert Storm. It's insane. It's ridiculous. The only mofo who could handle these barbarous groups like ISIS and ISIL would be Saddam Hussein. He's the only one who could keep order in that country. We destroyed them once, and now they're destroying themselves from the inside. It's despicable. It's my greatest horror of our generation is to never see a Vietnam twice. And as you say, we sat around the living room during dinner time watching Vietnam on TV. And I thought that simply would never happen. George Bush didn't give that kind of access. Why? Because he was savage murder and torture of 1 million Iraqis. So it's all in the context of history. And I agree. Yahweh, this is the unique thing about Yahweh. He rules over 110,000 light years of the Milky Way, and that's only one of the many, many galaxies. But the unique claim in Christianity is that he has a one-on-one relationship, if you choose, of such a care and concern that Jesus would heal a blind man, or Jesus would touch a leper, or Jesus would have conversation with a woman at the Samaritan well, or Jesus would deal with Mary Magdalene. My church is Mary Magdalene, a prostitute that people wouldn't want to sully their reputation. That Jesus would be called the friend of sinners because he went into pubs, or an imbiber because he drank at the pubs. It's encouraging to know that he was a real human being. I discovered that the owners of this parody site, which I was so excited for at first, getting 40 hits out of 250 people, was actually by Scottish. And we are hated in Europe, as you know, for many reasons, and we're hated in Scotland. And this was his powerful way of, bad teeth, coward, refusing to acknowledge my popularity on his website. Well said. Well said. I don't know much about Prime Minister David Cameron. I do know that Paul Benison absolutely hated the guy who co-conspired with Bush in the war. His name escapes me for the minute now. That plays more golf than a certain 1980s Case Western Reserve medical student who had a gullible, naive, friendly fool. You need to write a short story. You could write a whole book about, my experiences with Maddie. and just bring out all these details. Anything you forgot, I would probably have remembered. And I have a feeling if you remember buying him green fee, Snicker bar, sodas, new golf shoes, that you didn't forget much. Yeah, well, the Cowardly Lion web administrator, there's zero original work, and that alone should warrant interest. They go to the Onion and put a story from the Onion up there. That's just bullshit. So I'm not going to work for them anymore. I'll find a better site. All right, I think that covers it. Good day.